16th episode of Qatsyr Harvest. We're exploring the conditions around and the expectations surrounding the Shavuot harvest, which is the next fulfillment of a mikra. And it is on our horizon, just 7 years prior to Yahweh's return with Dode, which will transpire in 2033 on October 2nd. We subtract the 7 years symbolic of Shavuot from that date, and we end up with the celebration of Shavuot on the Shabat of May 22nd, 2026. And in our last episode, we recognized that this isn't a time for a vacation. Shavuot is a harvest, and that's the time when the harvesters go to work. God is expecting a great deal of us. He is trying to encourage us to roll up our sleeves, to go to work, to make a difference in the lives of his people. We have all eternity to vacation. Now's the time to go to work. And that really is the message of Shavuot. And as we considered the list of 8 individuals that Yahweh designated for Shavuot, about half of whom are women, about half of whom are men. Some half are Goyim and some half are Yehudim. This is actually a more favorable breakdown, both feminine, masculine, Yisraelite and non-Yisraelite, than we see much of any place else. So this is a time for us to work together, for us to be a family, for us to stop squabbling and focus on what matters. Because what matters is Yisrael. And even in the case of the Goyim, and they're really not presented as Goyim, they're presented as workmen and as ger in this particular analysis. These are individuals who are engaged on behalf of Israel. And that's who God is trying to equip to make a difference at this time. So if you're wondering what small thing that you can offer God that reflects positively on what he has done for us, especially what he is offering on this day, I'd bring a copy of the Torah along to read and recite, to listen to him. I was just making a comment on the feed to this Facebook page, and I was noticing there's a picture of a bunch of rabbinical types banging their heads against the Western Wall, and they had the gumption to put as the caption to this picture of them, all dressed up, and they're doing their head bobbing to the wall, and they're reciting their rabbinical prayers to say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai is one. I about barfed, and that's not good for the keyboard. So I restrained myself, and I pushed the keyboard back for a moment, gained, some composure, and wrote, that's not what he said. He said, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh is one. What right do you have to erase God's name? Why would you be praying to him when the very instruction you cited asked you to listen to him? Do you not know the difference between listening and talking? Why in the hell are you bobbing your heads against a stone wall that was erected by an anti-Semite who was put in position by Rome? You learn nothing. What do you think the consequence is of erasing Yahweh's name from your lives? You even call yourselves Yahud, and you don't even seem to understand the implications. Yahud, it is a compound name based on 2 names, Yahweh and Dod. It means Yahweh's beloved. And you don't recognize either individual. It's just so sad. I mean, we're here working on your behalf, and you're not paying attention. What's it going to take, Israel, for you to finally pay attention? Stop erasing Yahweh's name. Start listening to him. Oh, I have every confidence that Yahweh can accomplish whatever he sees fit, but I'm not sure that 8 individuals is going to be enough to get this one done. The other thing that I would encourage, of course, is that if you want to be part of making eternity better, if you want to contribute something that will cause Yahweh to smile, then join us in this harvest. We're here to gather the Israelites home. And this time, unlike the last where Yahweh rescued them from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, he is not going to do this with a firm hand. He is not going to drag embittered and antagonistic children kicking and screaming. He made that point. I encourage you to read Yirmiyah 31. While it correctly identifies that those that he will be returning to and that he will restore his covenant with are Yisrael and Yehudim. So that's a good start. But he makes it very clear that the reaffirmation of his Berith covenant will not be the same as it was during the time of the Exodus, where he specifically says that he brought you out with a firm, resolute, uncompromising hand. He literally usurped your free will because you were too stupid to get out of your own way. You were too hard-headed to listen. You were ungrateful. You were embittered. You wanted to go back to slavery where you were about to experience genocide. Like telling the liberators of Auschwitz, no thanks. We'll stay here, the food's good and all when we get it. No. This time he's not going to do that. So this time our words have to matter. You have to choose of your own volition to listen and then respond intelligently, which when it comes to God is something you haven't done in 3,400 years. In his next statement, we're reminded that Yahweh wants to celebrate this occasion with his children. And the more the merrier, I suppose. I'm not so sure it's a numbers thing as it is a quality thing. Yahweh was content with Adam, and then Adam and Chawah. 8 aboard the ark was ample for him. He chose Abraham and Sarah. And when it was Abraham, Sarah, and Yishak, he was all happy. Yishak even means laughter. And so it's not about how many. It's really about the attitude, the aptitude of those who opt to be part of this covenant family. Yahweh is sufficiently entertaining and enlightening that even if there were 100 of us, there'd be plenty to discuss and lots to do. I'd prefer there would be 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 of the 100 billion people who have set their feet upon this earth over the last 100,000 years or so. That's a pretty small percentage. And our intent isn't to increase the number, but it is to provide good information about how to participate in the covenant, how to attend the Moed Mikre, when they will occur, who fulfilled them, such that you are in a position to make an intelligent decision. And if you are made of the right stuff, you're welcome. But don't be dragging your religion with you or your politics. They're not welcome. So, truthfully, the festival feast of 7 Shabbats, like all harvests, is a gala. It's a celebration for those who want to rejoice and be glad. It's a homecoming that includes men and women. It includes those who are engaged on behalf of Yahweh. It reads, you can genuinely rejoice and be glad in the presence of Yahweh. Now, this is what we shared a week ago. You and your son, singular, your daughter, singular, a male co-worker and a female co-worker who measures up, one who unites, who, for the benefit of the relationship, is thoughtful and rational in your community. A ger who is on a sojourn with you. And an orphan who is fatherless, and a widow who is also husbandless, all wanting to be led on the correct path, standing up at the proper place, which to show the way to the benefits of the relationship Yahweh chooses for his personal and proper name to dwell and reside. The place he has chosen over these past 22 years is YAHOWAH.com, or short, YAHOWAH.com. Here on the places we're live streaming this message via the Yahowah blog, our Facebook, X, and YouTube accounts. This is where Yahweh's name resides. I was the first in at least 2,500 years, and maybe closer to 3,000 years, to reintroduce the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name to his people. Explained its pronunciation to its people. I'm the first to recognize that his beloved son, David, served not only as the Messiah and the king, that he was the very Son of God, his firstborn. And as such, he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah B'Kurim, in year 4000 33 CE, and he is the returning Messiah and king. I'm the first to provide accurate dates as to when every Moed Mikre was fulfilled previously and will be fulfilled in our future, so that you know when to attend. So throughout the ages, men and women, through whether it be compulsion or choice, have come to fear and worship their God. By contrast, Yahweh's inclination is to celebrate a mutually enjoyable relationship. Man has long stressed about being saved, and yet God's preference is to relax and enjoy our company. I rather like Yahweh's approach. Yahweh actually doesn't need to save us. He and his son perfected us. One of the benefits of the covenant. It's one of the conditions of the covenant. Walk to God and allow him to perfect us. This happens the second of 3 Moed Mikre on Matzah. To the door to life and to heaven is open. We recognize that though David took our guilt and deposited in Sheol, never to be seen again, making us appear perfect in God's eyes. There is no evidence against us. There's no need for salvation. The beneficial result has already been delivered. We just need to capitalize upon it. Now, speaking of most people, they plead with God, whose name and preferences they do not know, expecting that he will acquiesce to their desires. That is particularly pathetic, because Yahweh introduced himself to us and he shared his intent. There are many places of Yahweh's choosing, as I have hinted at previously, and most of them are related. With Adam, it was Eden. With Noah, it was the ark. With Abraham, it was the promised land. During the Yatza Exodus, it was the tabernacle. With Dod, it became Jerusalem. With Solomon, it was the home for Yahweh's name, often called the first temple. As a place, it is Moriah and Zion, that ridge line, and Jerusalem. Yehudah, Yisrael. But more than this, Yahweh's name belongs in his Torah, where Jews and then Christians erased it. It belongs and is stated among his Nambi, his prophets, within his Bereth covenant family, throughout his Mikre invitations to be called out to meet, and inside his Am family. Yahweh's name resides most dramatically through and in Yehudah, beloved of Yah. When we are in one of these places, mentally or physically, we are in the midst of the place Yahweh has chosen for his name to reside and remain. Yahweh asked his choder and then empowered him with his 7 Ruach spirits to compose a nesh, a sign, in which Yahweh's name would be proclaimed. And it is in all of these books behind me. You can see the name under which they are published. Yada means to know, Yahweh. And of course, at the YAHOWAH.com website, it's all there. Bold, powerful, irrefutable. I find it particularly poignant that the passage culminates with a reference to standing up at the place that Yahweh, your God, chooses. Father and Son stood up for us on Mount Moriah, ultimately enabling us to stand with them, camping out together for all time. Also, you'll notice that Yahweh introduced the all-inclusive nature of this team, if you will, and I'm not so sure all-inclusive really is the right term, but it was a reasonably broad-based assemblage of men and women. A son, a daughter, a male and female co-worker, a gur, someone who is sojourning with God's people, a loe, one who unites. Now, these are really interesting terms, and then particularly for it to conclude with, and a child who is without parents, and a woman who is without a husband. You know, it's like God saying that his covenant is for people who have come out of fractured human families. And that would be most all of us. It is for those who are not part of the family of man anymore. In a way, the 8 people represent one person. We are all Yahweh's children. As God makes it very clear, we all have male and female characteristics. We're all sons and daughters of God. We're all co-workers, and we do work that has masculine and feminine attributes, don't we? We're all called to be uniters. We're all on this journey with Yahowah to call his people home. And we've all come out of fractured human families, whether it be broken marriages or just parents that were hostile to our interests. And it is this way that we've all shed all of that and embraced it, depending on the particular descriptor, and become part of Yahweh's family. It is indicative of us all. Each of us are all of these things. The fact that Yahowah wants us to celebrate and be glad in his loving arms when he comes upon us. There is a place in Yashayah that actually speaks of, at this time, that Yahowah is going to descend upon those who are celebrating this Qatsyr harvest as the warmth of light and as the embrace of dew, to be as invigorating and restorative for us, nurturing for us, and to cover us, envelop us like the soft dew of a warm morning, and then to surround us with his light, invigorating us, enlightening us, empowering us. That's a wonderful picture of how many of us are going to experience Shabuah, so that we're re-energized and equipped to go to work, to do all we can to reacquaint Yehudim with Yahowah. And clearly, by God continually emphasizing, rejoice, be elated, be happy, celebrate, God's not looking for sourpusses. No. The children of Israel, as they were embittered through the Exodus, there's a reason that not any but 2 made it into the promised land. They were sourpusses. No sourpusses allowed in the ultimate promised land. The guy that was the most noteworthy of the whole, Koleb means all heart. He says, so what if they're big? So what if you think they're numerous? What does it matter? Since Yahweh is with us, who can be against us? What are you worried about? He told us he was taking us to this wonderful place. Let's go. Let's let go and trust Yah. He didn't see any obstacle. He saw opportunity. And I've gotten to the point in life where I recognize that God didn't say this was going to be easy. He made it clear it was achievable. And so when there are obstacles that are tossed in our way, they're just another opportunity to demonstrate that we've got what it takes to overcome them and prevail, to keep on going. Another chance to, I'm going to say it, to impress God. We've got gumption. Another, we've got backbone. We've got something that's so rare today. Loyalty. we're going to stick with God. Not just because every day is lollipops and rainbows, but because where we're headed is lollipops and rainbows. Well, apart from the persistent Islamic persecution of Christians and Jews, there are not many slaves currently in Egypt, although there are some 50 million of them worldwide. And yet, this message is universal, no matter the time, because most of us have had our liberty constrained, and it's going to be constrained ever more for Jews. And the more libertard progressives are empowered, the fewer liberties people are going to have. It's funny, they call themselves liberals, and yet they're opposed to liberty. Therefore, in the midst of this celebration, Yahweh would remind us of what he had done previously to engender our freedom. And freedom is a very powerful thing. One of the things that was so alarming to me one day to the next is how COVID-19 fundamentally changed the world. It was a virus that proved no more lethal than the flu. 1 in 1,000 people died from it that were infected by it. And yet, almost everyone the world over was willing to forgo their livelihoods and their liberty as a result of the fear porn and the government overreach, telling people what they could do, where they could go, how they could act. And so what I saw was how weak people are and how readily they will forego their freedom, even their livelihoods. I didn't think it was possible. And yet, there it is. And it's going to happen again and again as we move into the time of Jacob's troubles. And, now I realize that there is a religion that has enslaved 50 million people, almost all of them women, almost all of them sex slaves. A religion that has mutilated the genitals of 250 million little girls. A religion that inspired the savagery of 10/7/23 in Israel. A religion that was born to kill. And yet, the world doesn't seem to care. It was a religion that was funded based on the slave trade. No one seems to have the morality to stand up and say that's wrong. It shouldn't be allowed here. Yahweh is trying to get us to think differently. He says, remember, Zakar, that indeed you once existed as a slave in Mitzrayim, in the crucibles of religious and political oppression. So be observant and act upon these prescribed inscriptions for living. This is the second time Yahweh has encouraged us in connection with Shabuah to do something, to engage. And in this case, it is to act upon his prescriptions for living, the chokum, that which he has inscribed for our benefit, communicated in writing, so that we can be cut into the relationship. The Moed Mikre are clearly communicated written prescriptions for living. And we should shamar, observe them, closely examining and carefully considering them. And then Anah, act upon what God has chokum, inscribed and prescribed. This approach will lead away from Mitzrayim, and it directs us to Shamaim. The Mikre are not to be, therefore, replaced by ceremonies and rituals conceived by religious men. Those who observe Easter, Christmas, Rosh Hashanah, and Hanukkah All Hallows Eve and St. Valentine's Day, Ashura Day and Ramadan, the solstice or May Day, or any other man-made religious scheme contribute to the deception and add to the fog which separates mankind from God. Rabbis who are typically misogynist and racist are uncomfortable with the all-inclusive nature of Shabuah. They are about separating men and women, Jews and Gur, the religious from the secular, bringing everyone together on equal footing to work together for a common cause and acknowledge Yahweh's name in the process is the antithesis of what they desire. Therefore, they ignore everything that Yahweh instructed regarding Shabuah and replace it with the claim that it commemorates the time that Moshe received the Torah on Mount Horeb. And probably true. That the Torah was, at least initially, received during Shabuah. But should that be the case, what were the Jews doing at the time? You know? If you're going to be rabbinical and you're going to proclaim that Shavuot is not a harvest, it's not the result of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, but it's when their Talmud was delivered, then are you willing to man up and acknowledge what you were doing at the time? I know. You should know. You probably do know. You want to admit it? We're down there building a goddamn idol. A golden calf. And what was Yahweh's response? Do you recall it? To this outward expression of religiosity. What did God say to your religion then? Yeah, the earth swallow you, didn't he? What do you think he's going to do when he confronts your religion now? Do remember that he said he was consistent, that he doesn't change, right? So I'd be really careful if I were a Jew saying that Shabuah is the dates celebrating your oral law, which you now call a Torah, wrongly, but is actually your Talmud, which of course only dates to in the Jerusalem Talmud to the 2nd century CE, and the Babylonian Talmud to the time right around 500 CE. Yeah, they don't go back very far, do they? And while we can speculate that this occurred, and I think that the first day is probably true, and it was a hellish experience for Yahweh to watch his people do this. And of course, Moshe was so angry, he went and broke the first 2 tablets. And by the way, God did not say, I wish you had been more restrained, more reserved, more accepting, more tolerant, less angry. No, he wiped out those who were so offensive in their religiosity, and he simply scribed a new set. Looking forward to seeing them because they're in the Ark of the Covenant, and I was going to raise it very soon. Now, even though I suspect that part of that is true, it does miss the point. If we want to enjoy Yahweh's company, we must zakar, we must shamar, we must shashah, we must remember, we must be observant, closely examining and carefully considering what Yahweh has shared with us. And then we must shashah, act upon it and engage in what he revealed. Moreover, other than to dress it up, fondle it, parade it around, and kiss the Torah like it's some kind of whore with lipstick. The Hasidics are married to their Talmud, not Yahowah's teaching. Their preferred language is not Hebrew either, Yiddish. And second on to that, Aramaic. Yeah, they become nothing but whores and parasites. It is worth noting that some Christian denominations acknowledge Shabuah. The only mikre so honored. Unfortunately, they do not know its proper name or its significance of its title, and they celebrate it on the wrong day, choosing the counterfeit of Pentecost or Whitsun, it said. And they attribute it to the birth of their goddamn church rather than celebrating a relationship with Yahowah. They put it in the past when it is to be fulfilled in our future. Hey, but 1 of 7. Better than none, right? No. None of Shabuah's redemptive metaphors or prophetic insights are conveyed to their congregations, of course. For them, it's all about the beginning of the church age and of them replacing Jews as God's instruments. No thought is ever given to this being the fourth stride towards living with God, or that it was the midpoint in Yahowah's 7-step plan of reconciliation. The first and the final 3 steps along the way, they completely reject. They even fail to see how 7 Shabbat serves as a central plank in the unfolding of God's redemptive timeline, providing the very framework of Yahowah's schedule. Our preference, however, should always be to listen to Yahowah and to go where his words lead. In this case, he said, and this is a summation of what we have read thus far in Devarim. You should consistently recount the written documentation on how to relate to 7 sevens, and thus to the promises of 7, as it pertains to you, beginning with bringing the sickle, the implement for liberating, separating, gathering, and harvesting, unto the standing grain, that which is upright and firmly rooted, ratified, confirmed, and established. Begin by initiating the process to recount the written word regarding 7 sevens. Then you should act upon and engage in the festival feast, the celebration of Shabuah, of sevens, of Shabbats, and of promises, to approach Yahowah your God with a solvent, appropriate, affordable, transparent, and thus water. Voluntarily offered of one's own initiative of your hand, which to demonstrate the way to benefit from the relationship you actually give compared to how this relationship, Yahowah your God, continues to bless, adoring you. You can genuinely rejoice and be glad in the presence of Yahowah your God. You and your son, your daughter, your male co-worker, and your female co-worker who measures up. The uniter, those who to benefit from the relationship are within your community. Those of the sojourner who remains steadfast with you, living with you. The orphan who is fatherless, and the widow who is husbandless, wanting to be led on the correct path in your midst, standing up at the proper place, which to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship Yahweh your God chooses for his personal and proper name to reside. Remember that you once existed as a slave in Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression. Be observant and act upon these prescribed prescriptions for living, which cut you into the relationship. Shabuah is Yahweh's Nathan, his gift to the covenant family. It's an opportunity for us, and it comes highly recommended. Now, considering how little attention Jews afford to Shabuah, Yahweh actually has a great deal to say about it. Now, Pesach is thoroughly explained prior to the Yatzah and Shemot Exodus. The presentation of Matzah and Kar Leviticus is rich, both in information and detail, and it is hugely emphasized, if you will. Yahweh throws every important quantifier at it so that we might understand its relevance in our lives. And while not much is said actually about Bikurim, other than it is a first fruits harvest, that all changes with Shabuah. Based upon the words he has devoted to it, 7 Shabbat is important to God and to our relationship with him, which is why Yahweh asked us to act upon it, why he encouraged us to celebrate it, and why he called it an essential time in our lives. Now, back in an earlier portion of our review of the Moed Mikra, back when Yahweh was discussing the details pertaining to Bikurim, God spoke of his Mikra being a cohesive whole, played out in 3 acts, he said. So to establish the proper context for what follows, and by way of reinforcing what God said so that we can do as he has asked and remember, this is that section from Shemot, which means names. It has been corrupted to Exodus, the 23rd chapter. We'll begin at the 10th statement. 6 years you should sow your land and gather in the produce thereof. But in the 7th, you should allow it to fall and lie fallow, freeing it, scattering and dispersing it for the purpose of future renewal, so that those in need who are willing to capitalize upon this opportunity and take some responsibility among your people may eat and be nourished. Moreover, leave the remainder so that other living creatures of the open fields and countryside may feed upon it. Do the same with your vineyards and with your olive groves, on a 6+1 basis. It's God's version of a non-entitlement. There would be food to eat for everyone, even the most impoverished. But you would have to go harvest it. You'd have to prepare it. The same thing would be true with shelter and clothing. The materials would be made available, but only if you were willing to exert the effort to go get them and then do something with them. 6 days, God says, you should engage and do your work, accomplishing whatever you prefer. And then on the 7th, the day of promise, you should celebrate the Shabbat, actively engaging in the promise of 7, so that those tasked with carrying your burdens and your means of production may have a break, becoming spiritually refreshed and restored. Then the children of your workers and visitors from different cultures and ethnicities sojourning with you may take a breather and be refreshed as well. Shemot names, Exodus 23:12. In all things that benefit the relationship which I have shared with you, be observant. Therefore, do not bring to mind by proclaiming in a memorable way the names of other gods. Neither let them be heard from your mouth. Shemot names, Exodus 23:13. Just as a small point here amongst the major point that Yahweh was making. Yahweh says the names of false gods all the time. Baal, the Lord, happens to be one of them. He uses Asherah, which is the mother god. He speaks of Tammuz. And so God's instructions weren't to say these names because they need to be said, just like Jesus Christ and Allah. They need to be said and renounced. It's saying them and proclaiming them in a memorable way so that people choose to revere them. That's what's wrong. God never does that, nor should we. So writing God, for example, is, as G-D is just brain dead. I mean, first of all, Gad, spelled the same way in Hebrew, was the name of one of the descendants of Yaakov. And to say, okay, well, you can't write G-D, but you can write L, when El was the name usurped by one of the Canaanite gods. And then you can write Lord, which is from Adonai or Baal, but Yahweh says the Lord is the adversary's title and name. People just aren't thinking in this regard. Now, the pattern of 6 plus 1 is essential to capitalizing upon the promise that Yahweh is making to us. And this is because everything plays out in accordance with this pattern. Also, never lose sight of the fact that Yahweh wants 2 things from us beyond all else. He is asking us to be observant and to not be religious. When we honor these 2 requests, good things are in store for our soul. Just as there is a 6 plus 1 pattern to the Moed Mikre, they play out in 3 epochs of time defined by periods of 40 Yobel. 7 times 7 plus 1 equals 50, times 40 equals 2,000 years. We are to celebrate the first 3 Chag in the first month. The Shabuah Qatsyr, 7 sevens thereafter. Then the final 3 Moedim, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, are to be enjoyed during the 7th month. But even more than this, Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim are fulfilled in year 4,000 Yah. The Shabuah harvest will transpire 7 years before year 6,000 Yah, which is the last 3 Mikre will be observed. The pattern repeats itself every year and then plays out over the millennia. Now, following this pattern is how we're able to set the dates of Shabuah, the Shabbat of May 22nd, 2026, Towrah, the Shabbat of September 23rd, 2033, at least the evening of it. The following day will be the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. Kippurim, sunset, 6:22 p.m. on October 2nd, 2033, and Sukkah is the Shabbat of October 7th, 2033, to be fulfilled on that dates and that timeline. There's even some celestial fireworks in store for us in this regard, and that there'll be a full solar eclipse on Towrah and a full lunar eclipse on Sukkah of this year. The Dode, as the Messiah and the Son of God, speaking as Gabriel, which means God's most courageous and capable man, established the dates in 4033 CE when he would return to Jerusalem to honor his commitment to enable the benefits of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And then he told us how long before his return, 7 years, that we should expect Shabuah as a harvest 7 years prior to his return. Once we add the 40 Yobel to 33 CE, the rest is easily determined. And that's why I've shared these dates with you. Before the conclusion of this presentation, we will consider what Dode, as Gabriel, God's most courageous and capable man, had to say about when he would fulfill Chag Matzah, and then when Shabuah would transpire. So continuing with God's overall presentation, his framing of the issue, if you will, of the Moed Mikre, he continued in Shemot, names, Exodus 23, with the following. 3 times you should be on your feet during the festival feast to approach me each year. On your feet means ready to go. You know, you're not laying down as this is siesta time. Means you're ready to engage. You're ready to go where Yahweh needs you to be. The Chag celebration of matzah, unyeasted bread, you should observe, closely examine, and carefully consider. 7 days you should actually and consistently eat bread without the embittering fungus and the continuous nature of yeast. Contentious nature, I should say, of yeast. Representing religion and politics, of course. Do so in a manner that is consistent with the way to receive the benefits of the relationship which I have instructed you, approaching during the eternal witness of the appointed meetings. In the month of Abib, the first month of the year, during the spring when barley is still green and growing. Abib. Indeed, in it you were removed and came forth, delivered and withdrawn from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of political and religious oppression. Therefore, no one will appear before me without reason or cause, without what is expected based upon what has been fulfilled. Now, it's worth noting that Chag Matzah is analogous to the Yatsa Exodus from Mitzrayim. The beneficiaries are released from the malignant control and the caustic influence of man's ungodly contrivances, religion and politics, militarism, and the caste system. When we come out of religion and politics with Yahweh, through the Mikre, the stigma and stench are removed. And we are immortal, perfected, adopted, enriched, and empowered. This all serves to bring us home by way of the Qatsyr harvest of Shabuah, where we genuinely go to work to express the promise of 7. This is a time of firstborn children, and its timing and purpose are to protect us really from the hellish influence of the time of Jacob's troubles and from Islamic genocidal rage against Israel, so that we are prepared to stand up for Israel, to minimize the carnage, all the while calling God's people home. Our Creator, our Father, continues with, you should observe the festival feasts of Qatsyr, the harvest, reaping what was sown and is ready to be gathered, of Bakurim, firstborn children. Your unrelenting undertakings and your ongoing pursuits to make a connection and to show the benefits of the relationship that you have sown, expecting these seeds to take root and grow, Zerah, throughout the region, and along with the festival feast of the ingathering, of being received and rewarded, you are restored and renewed. then you are gathered in. You were received and accepted. That which is associated with your actions and whatever you choose to pursue will lead you to the realm where there is a sense of openness. Now, Shavuot, the promise of the Shabbat, is the most important, all-encompassing, and most impressive Qatsyr harvest on Yahweh's eternal calendar. Not only are Yehudim included in it and Israelites, and not only are some Gur and co-workers, Ebed, part of cultivating this harvest on behalf of God's people. From Yahweh's perspective, these are his best and brightest, at least of his children at this time. Those brought home on this day, those enabled by God to bring his people home at this time, will all have capitalized upon what has been done in the preceding, better part of 2,000 years. They will have read, of course, the prophets, what they wrote, starting with Moshe and continuing through Malachi, processing it all to embrace the conditions of the Bereth family, while accepting the Mikra invitations, aware of our Father's name, appreciative of what his son, Dod, has done. We will have to have their backs, Israel's backs, because they'll be up against the proverbial wall that we began this program. There'll be no one else to turn, and we need to make certain they know that Yahweh is there for them, and that Dod will soon return to them. So we have a vested interest in letting God's people know that this harvest is upon them, as we encourage them to participate. Now, beyond acknowledging that Shavuot is a Qatsyr, a harvest, we are reminded that it is of Bikurim, it is of firstborn children. And that is to say, the participants will be the fruit of what our Savior, Dod, our King, enabled during Pesach and Matzah. Also informative when it comes to participating in the relationship which leads to the harvest, we control our own destiny. That is to say that our pursuits determine not only our outcome, but to a large degree, the outcome of so many other souls that would not otherwise know of God's plan, his name, his son's contribution, the timing of these Moed Mikra, and how to participate if we did not engage and roll up our sleeves and go to work at this time. Now, adding to our understanding of Shavuot, Yahweh speaks of Zerah, seeds, which are sown. Most take root and grow, but not all of them. Now, this is encouraging for the most part because the final Zeroah is responsible for cultivating this harvest. And Zeroah is a derivative of Zerah, which was used in the last statement. And so it is this Qatsyr that we have been asked to pursue. It is our job. It's our work. It's our mission. And by doing it well and in harmony with the Spirit and the Word of God, there will be a productive akaf, gathering of souls, received, empowered, enriched by Yahweh. Just as the first three Mikra were fulfilled in succession in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, and included the ingatherings of Bikurim, the final three Moedim will transpire in succession in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033 CE, with Towrah serving as the final ingathering. This means that Shavuot will be fulfilled at a different time, coinciding with the onset of the time of Yaakov's troubles in 2026. God states 3 times in the conduct of your life, demonstrating a pattern of behavior which is in the proper sequence. During the year, all of you should remember to be seen before YAHOWAH. Therefore, all three, Bakurim, Shabuah, Towrah, these Qatsyr and ingatherings are specifically designed for us to be present and seen before our God, which means that we must know who he is, acknowledge him by name, know when we should be present and accounted for, and be about our Father's business, which is to reconcile his relationship with the rest of his family. Now, this affirms that a harvest of souls is an essential component of the spring, early summer, and fall festival feast, and that we should enjoy reaping what we have sown. And the spring, this ingathering of souls, is Bakurim, or firstborn children. As the name implies, those whose lives have been prolonged and perfected during Pesach and Matzah are invited to become part of God's family on Bakurim. In the late spring, early summer, 7 weeks after firstborn children, we are prepared for the bountiful harvest of souls associated with standing grain, this time wheat rather than barley. Our invitation home is courtesy of the Ruach made during Shabuah. In the fall, YAHOWAH's ingathering begins with the proclamation of the approaching harvest of Towrah, heralds. And like Shabuah, it is proclaimed by sounding the shofar. This leads to Yom Kippurim and to the reconciliation of Yehudah and Israel with YAHOWAH as facilitated by Dod's return. By Sukkah, we're all together in Eden, one big happy family camping out together. Of course, to bridge that gap between Towrah and Kippurim, such that the mortal remnant of Israel is prepared for the return of God, there will be the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, which will then prepare the adulterous woman, Israel, to be betrothed to her Messiah and King, Dod. It's very, actually fairly complex, the acts of this play as we move through this period of time and all of the things that YAHOWAH has laid out that will be accomplished. Very detailed, interwoven plots, interwoven characters. It really is a marvelously written story, and it's all going to play out in our very near future. Now, the common thread in these harvests is the presence of the set-apart spirit and the contributions of Dod in concert with YAHOWAH and what he is achieving. It is what makes it all possible, if you will. 7 Shabbats, solves the mandate of none shall appear before me as an empty vessel. We aren't to come empty-handed. We all should have contributed something important in the process of fulfilling Shabuah. The trumpets on the precipice of Kippurim serves as Yisrael's last opportunity to be withdrawn and then to enter into our Heavenly Father's presence when he returns. Those who answer YAHOWAH's invitation to appear will find their opportunity to be accepted. And I suppose better late than never. But earlier is far better because you have the opportunity to make a contribution and join us. Now, beyond this introduction, we can venture further into Shavuot and review a little bit of Bikurim as to how all of this happens. And I'll read the first statement or two, and then we'll conclude this program and pick up these thoughts where we rejoin. It says, "You should not offer the sacrifice of an animal you have prepared to consume in proximity of the yeasted bread, the invasive fungus which spoils, as well as the culture which intoxicates. The blood sacrificially shed and offered as a favor to reconcile, you should not endure through the night. It is the bounty of my festival feast, which is an enduring witness come morning and something to consider forever. The initial and best part of the first fruits, including firstborn children of your realm, you should come bringing them for the family and home of Yahweh your God. Behold, I will send out a messenger, a representative who is especially informative in advancing this message before you, in your presence, and within the same dimension, to help keep you focused so that you are observant, closely examining, and carefully considering everything along the way. In addition, he will provide you with directions that will help bring you to the source, to the very dwelling place and the home, which to offer the benefits of the relationship I have prepared." Shemot names, Exodus 23:20. And in this reading, the prophecy is fulfilled. I thank you for listening to this episode of the YAHOWAH blog. I look forward to you inviting me back into your homes and to your lives to enrich your experience with God, to equip you to join us in cultivating this important harvest. Thank you again for listening. I am your host, Craig Winn.